Wednesday, December 25, 2013, 12:44 p.m. I'm in the kitchen, dressed in a bright floral apron, arranging pale turkey pieces on a tray, and dripping sweat as I do so. Through the window above the sink, I can see into the backyard, where the women are sitting in the shade of the pergola, looking for the umpteenth time at the wedding pictures, while the men tend to the hissing barbecue. "Just look at you, you're absolutely gorgeous," says my mother Edna, one hand on her ample chest, the other holding up the iPad. Mrs. Dixon murmurs appreciatively as Auntie Beres swipes from photo to photo. "That dress, Kylie dear, was so perfect." I know, says Kylie. "And look, there's Yvonne and Leanne, don't they look good?" "Not too good, darling. You never want the bridesmaids, so I'll do the bride." "Everything was done just right," says Auntie Beres, nodding. Smell of burnt meat wafts over from the barbecue. "And here we are on our honeymoon at Byron Bay," Kylie giggles, covering her mouth and pointing. "Brad was so funny." "What was Brad doing on your honeymoon?" asks Mrs. Dixon. "Oh, he met up with us after we visited my relatives in Newcastle." I see. Over at the smoke-shrouded barbecue, my rather spindly father, Jack, is dancing with the occasional flames and spitting fat, lunging with his spatula. His floral apron, identical to mine, hangs off him like a collapsed tent. Mr. Dixon is standing nearby, beer in hand, talking to my Uncle Frank. "This carbon tax is absolute nonsense," says Mr. Dixon. "So glad the government's going to scrap it. I mean, climate change. Give me a break." Uncle Frank takes a swig of his beer and winks at me. The doorbell rings and Kylie shouts, "I'll get it!" and then she runs through the open sliding doors into the house. Moments later I hear her squeal, "Brad!" and I feel a rush of nausea. "Merry Christmas! Ho, ho, ha, ha!" "Mwah! No, you didn't, but I didn't get you anything." "Go ahead, open it." Brad's voice becomes louder as he walks into the kitchen. "Dan, you old bastard! Merry Christmas!" He slaps me on the back, and a turkey wing falls out of my hand onto the floor, where Bugsy sniffs it delicately. "I think Brad's here. He's such a nice boy," says Auntie Beres. "Daniel, bring out the rest of the meat for your father," shouts Mum. "Oh my, Brad!" Kylie feigns breathlessness as she examines the gold and silver watch at arm's length. "It's beautiful. Oh, thank you. Mwah!" Brad shifts shyly from one foot to the other, raising his hands as if to say, "What can I say?" "Daniel, did you hear me?" "Yes, Mum." "He's a bit absent-minded, my Daniel, a hard worker, but sometimes he needs to be reminded a little," I hear assuring Mrs. Dixon. "I'm afraid he takes after his father in that regard." Meanwhile, Kylie has put the watch on and is thrusting it limp-wristed towards me. "Look, Dan, isn't it just fabulous?" She turns to Brad. "Come on, everyone's out at the back," she says, looping her arm through his and leading him to the sliding doors. I grab the tray and look up just in time to see Mr. Dixon giving Brad a two-handed handshake, and Kylie running on her tiptoes to the pergola, where the women flock to her extended arm like seagulls to a French fry. As I approach the barbecue, I try to avoid the plume of smoke, but it follows me wherever I turn. "Thanks, son," says Dad, blinking furiously as he throws fresh drumsticks amongst the charred ruins. "Where was I? Ah, yes, carbon tax," says Mr. Dixon to Uncle Frank, who is munching on a piece of turkey, a blackened fragment clinging to his chin. "If the Senate won't scrap it, you know what the government should do?" The two men step back to let the smoke pass between them. "Double dissolution," he says to the cloud. "For heaven's sake, Jack, it's burning," shouts Mum. "It's the caramel basting," he moans. "It always burns. I pour some beer on the flames. "Double dissolution, I tell you. Call a fresh election." A hand gropes through the fog in answer. "I think it's time we call the fire department," says Mrs. Dixon. The smoke shifts to reveal that Uncle Frank is on his knees, clutching his throat, his square-framed glasses askew and his face turning a shade of purple. "Mate, you crack me up," laughs Brad. Then Frank falls forward on his face, I can see the top of his head where he is balding. "He's such a joker!" "Frank, are you okay?" shouts Dad. Mrs. Dixon runs up as I'm turning him over. "I think he's stopped breathing," she says. "Quick, somebody call an ambulance."